some of the
Talk to us
examples.
about garage.
Yeah, talk to us about some of the examples in reference to the revisions. I think we need an update on that.
For the record, William Walters, Director for Community Sustainability. Also with me is Maxime Ducoste, our new Planning and Preservation Manager.
Welcome.
He's been here about a month, so be nice to him, please. As we explained to you all back in August when we adopted the LDRs, our land development regulations are a living, breathing document, and we knew that we would find some areas where we need to make some adjustments or some clarifications as we worked with implementing it. Now that we have a great attorney working with us, Mr. Tresivia's office, we did discover some areas where our land development code is slightly in conflict with Florida statute. So we've brought in some definitions from the Florida statute, one being the gaming arcade section. We've also identified some uses that we did not feel had been defined well enough. One of those are extended stay uses for some motel rooms to allow them to be used up to 60 days. The garage issue, I think everyone's well aware of the garage that was added onto a house on D and 17th Street, which sort of drove everybody crazy. We did put in provisions to prevent that from happening again, and we have strengthened that some more under the garage definition. One of the more important things here is that we are discovering that certain people with existing homes are limited on how much they can add onto their house. And so we put in a provision that there's a one-time provision to let the house be bigger by 10% if it's dealing with ADA, familial status changes such as bringing in your mother-in-law or father-in-law to take care of them, or to meet minimum housing standards which we adopted back in February of 2012. So it's a one-time chance to bring your house up to code and not have to ask for a variance and be done administratively. The code also had an old administrative variance process which allowed a 10% deviation from the code. The LDR we adopted allowed a 5%, but we did not include everything that might be germane to providing that 5% deviation. So we've added a couple of things. Height is not one of them. It's dealing with like floor area ratio, lot coverage, building lot coverage. So if we have an odd circumstance, we can work with the property owner and not be a disincentive. We've included some more uses that were not there before. Those appear on the use table. There's some new definitions that we found were mentioned in the code itself that did not have a definition. And the major two things came in with mechanical systems. Right now, the old code did not allow mechanical systems for residential properties to be placed in side setback or front setback. But it did allow them for existing homes. So we've clarified that distinction and describe what mechanical systems are, and it also includes generators. Because of an ordinance we're going to see a little bit later, we have a definition of what a mobile food vendor is, because we do have the use that was allowed called mobile food court, but we didn't actually really specify too well what a mobile food vendor would be when they're actually working in a mobile food court. Some of the other new issues that we identify from uses are uses that really pertain to the internet. We've had a lot of interest in specialty automobile broker. That's not a place where you'd actually store a car or have a car in-house, but they would like to have an office so that they conduct their business. The person would come pick up their car. The car would have to be stored inside until the time it was transferred over. And there's quite a bit of interest in this as a transitional use in the artisanal industrial district, as well as Park of Commerce and some of the small storage bay areas. We did clarify a correction with regard to the membership on the Planning and Zoning Board when it came to absences. A lot of this is just housekeeping things. We clarified the notice table as well as the decision-making power table. This is the administrative adjustment section I just mentioned earlier. The permitted use table, which now has the accessory mechanical equipment, which also includes generators as permitted uses in all the districts with certain restrictions. The vehicle broker, the special interest automobile dealership, extended stay motel and hotel rooms. And then here's the part about the garages. It specifically mentions that a garage cannot be built unless there's a principal use already on the site. And this is for, we read it again and realized that that may be a little bit of a loophole, so we clarified that and cleaned up this language so that people just couldn't put a garage out on a residential property or someplace else and it stand there just by itself. what was that other one? This is mechanical equipment, issue and generators. And then we also had to work on our political sign section did not meet the Florida statutes for freedom of speech. So that's been clarified, and the political signs have to follow the same format and restrictions of commercial signage or residential signage. That's all been tightened up, and some of the issues we've had in the past with enforcement and what you can and cannot do are clarified.
That's interesting.
And that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe bring back a few more in about 6 months, because we're going to be looking at this as we go along and identify things.
Commissioner Thorne?
I'm looking for a couple of clarifications. On the mechanical, can you just walk us through what it was and what it is, so I understand the change in terms of, say, generators and air conditioners and so on?
What it was in the old code before we changed it was that standby generators and mechanical equipment could not be in the side setbacks or front setback for new construction. When we wrote the code, that provision was very unclear. So we clarified it and provided definitions of what a generator is and what types of fuel can be used, because there was a restriction on tank storage type fuel in the downtown area, which we left out, unfortunately. So that's been brought back in. And there's a provision, if you have an existing residence, you can put it in the setback, but you have to have at least 3 feet clear to your property line.
So that's a fairly, if I understand what you said correctly, that's a fairly substantial change that we used to not allow that on the sides of the front of the property, and now we do.
We had always the provision that you could put it in the side setback for residential properties if they were existing buildings, but no provision on limiting how much of that setback you could use. So we've actually beefed it up a little bit. You can put it in the side setback for an existing building that's already there, but you have to provide clearance of at least 3 feet to the property line. And that's basically so that fire can get back to the back of the property if we ever had an issue where you can get somebody out. As it was before, we had air conditioning set it into place 6 inches from the property line on existing properties, and that really is not a good thing to be doing.
Yeah, I was more concerned about noise issues and 3 feet, obviously
There are
doesn't.
limitations at 65 decibels
Okay.
when it's on. And we've already heard some feedback that those aren't available, but yes, they are. I have one, because mine's only 2 feet from the property line, so we've heard, you may have heard some feedback about that, but there are specifications and performance criteria in the backup material on units, and they can meet the 65 decibel or less restriction that's in the code.
Okay. Similarly, can you walk, I've got 2 more. One of them I think is easy, but can you walk me through the FAR floor area ratio changes before and after?
Before.
With these
now,
changes, what did we
All
change?
that we're changing now is allowing the 10% deviation, or 5% deviation that staff can approve of the maximum floor area ratio when it comes to the administrative adjustment that deals with a hardship such as familial status change, meeting the minimum housing code, dealing with a code compliance issue. It's not just for across the board. It's a special circumstance, and there are criteria there where it can deviate by 5%. The old code allowed deviations of up to 10.
So we've actually tightened down the
Yes.
administrative.
And provided a more clear criteria under which staff can approve them or not. If staff denies it, then the person could always appeal to either the Planning and Zoning Board or the Historic Resource Preservation Board as a variance.
Okay. My only concern is that I think when there was quite a bit of work on the LDRs a while back, there was a feeling that that our impervious, allowed impervious percentages, basically the FAR, were pretty high compared to a number of other places, and that we were actually fairly generous on that to environmental detriment.
Are you
And
referring to the code before we got to the LDRs or the new one?
version 6.23A-7. Yeah. No, I a while back, meaning a few years ago, there were people working on it that were quite conscious of that sort of thing, and I think we slid upward, and there was a concern that, so I'm glad that you've tightened it down a little bit, but that concern remains, and I guess the reasons I'd emphasize for that is that given that we're coastal, that we're on the lagoon, that we have an issue with saltwater intrusion that's only gonna get worse rather than better, all of those things are ameliorated by having more infiltration and less runoff. So anything we do to increase the pervious infiltration is a better thing for us.
Right.
So, plus we've got flooding issues in our storm sewers. So.
Commissioner Amoruso?
The changes on the motel, does that affect vacation rentals at all?
No,
Okay. The issues with the actual car mechanic piece, is that just industrial area?
it's
'Cause-
not a car mechanic. There are
Okay.
3 different types of vehicular sales: specialty, collectible, and just vehicular sales. It doesn't include anything in changing mechanics or vehicular maintenance, servicing, or that type of thing.
Okay, it doesn't address any of that. And then mobile food vendors, does that address the actual mobile food trucks that we want to actually encourage to come into events?
Well, in the LDRs that we adopted in August, we allowed a mobile food court in a couple of districts, one being the artisanal industrial district. However, we didn't define what the vendor was who was gonna be at the mobile food court. So that's what this provision is, and it also allows us to see how the mobile food vending court works out. If the city decides to expand that use in other areas, we have a basis from which to go.
And reiterate where that area was.
The artisanal industrial district is along the railroad tracks, of the FEC. It specifically was dealing with some of the very small lots that are sliver lots along the FEC around 10th Avenue North and a little farther south. And then, I think that's the only place we've allowed them in that one district. We wanted to make sure we had a tight control over them, and they didn't just end up being anywhere.
But this still doesn't address the mobile food vendors that we would want to bring in for events.
That's under a special event, that's a different whole story.
Okay.
Those are limitedly licensed for a specified period of time, like the Street Painting Festival or the Reggae Fest. They can, group there, as long as they meet the provisions of the special event restriction. The mobile food court is like a permanent use. You would create like a parking lot type environment, have landscaping, the trucks would park there, they would come in on a regular basis, and you would not have to have a special event or a special use permit.
Okay, because in the future, I'd still like to address the mobile food, look at that a little bit more, because I've sent a few vendors down that want to, they have a business license in West Palm Beach to be a mobile vendor or do events, and I've sent them down and they said, we're not ready in Lake Worth yet, we're not taking those kind of business. And to me, we're losing money because they can do it in every other city but Lake Worth.
Well, there are, I think there's a misrepresentation of the issues. We have had a lot of requests to allow mobile food vending to just come into the city and drive around and sell what they want.
Yeah.
That happens almost every day. And I know of no business that's downtown that wants a mobile food vendor parked in front of its business. So that is basically true, unless you're in a mobile food vending court that's been developed, or you're part of a sanctioned special event, you cannot do mobile food vending in the city.
Okay, and I just want to kind of maybe look at that, because if they're getting a business license in other cities to come in and do their events, and then, we're allowing them, we're possibly missing some funds there because they would get a business license. I'm not for a free-for-all where you can set up anywhere, but if you get a business license to actually do an event in the city of Lake Worth, as we move forward with our organization of signature events and things,
Right, exactly.
we need to try to tighten that up a
And
little
that'll be coordinated with leisure services and Ron Louise.
bit.
Commissioner Zerdy?
Thank you. Thanks, William. I'm glad you're revisiting these LDRs. Is it kind of semi-annual that you're looking at? Right?
We're keeping a running tab of things that are an issue, and we'll probably be preparing some semblance of an amendment once or twice a year.
So I'd like us to look at, being that we had a little presentation tonight on the cottages and all, and there are folks that are looking at, they're painting, they're doing windows, they're doing roofing, they're doing fencing. Is there anything in there for expeditious or permitting for that? help them?
We do have expedited permitting and project approval, and it falls under a couple of marketing segments. The one that's closest is in the tourism.
Right, it's not,
Unfortunately, we can look at it, but those types of permits probably get turned around as quickly as we could, and making them an expedited permit review might get them a half a day. Because most of the winter permits, as long as it's not in a historic district, are usually turned around within 2 or 3 days. Now that we have our own building official, our turnaround time is increased a lot.
but no, I've seen where it goes
Or
up,
decreased, I should
has
say.
to go to fire and then go to engineering, and there's, you know, even if it may not, I mean, I'm hoping that we're trying to be a little more expeditious with some of the things where, I know in windows in the historic district, if they're a change out and they're basically a replacement of the same size, don't you have discretion to,
The staff can approve those,
right?
yes.
So we've had a lot of that kind of feedback over the years that have just held people up from trying to get something done, and I'd like for us to maybe take some time to let folks know that this is an order, we want them to come in, we want them to do, because that's what a deterrent is, for them to get the permit and not get one and do stuff, and then we're in the middle of.
And you don't have to have a permit to paint.
Right.
We used to have in Lake Work. And the approval matrix for historic districts, the number of items that staff can approve, I think it's more than tripled since I got here. We had Kelly Christensen, who you'll probably meet later, with our designation ordinance coming up. So that continues to grow, the list of things that staff can approve administratively. That's helping out a lot.
I think, and it's not just for the cottages, but I think in regards to what they're talking about, to let people know that, you know, the building department is there to help assist them of what they need to do, and even educate on a limited basis, but we should have some handouts or whatever for them to say, brochures or little pamphlets to just let them know, here's how to get your requests through our system as quickly as possible. And I don't think that's a reputation prior to whatever, you know, this has been coming to the works here now, but, you know, and also I think with Mr. Martinez in place too, it's been quite helpful. I got a lot of good positive feedback from folks in the profession. So if we could maybe look at that, just, I don't think it's as clear for expediting things that way. I think some folks still have had issues. I know some folks here that did some windows recently and some siding, you know. So if we could maybe take a little time, you know, we could talk about that one.
Our biggest challenge is having the permit application cover the work that's actually being done and the documentation that's attached. And that's the struggle every day, to explain that if you're going to redo the siding and you pull the siding off and the sheeting has to be removed and do the insulation, that's much more than just replacing the siding permit. And we work with that on an ongoing basis. Before I forget, I do want to introduce somebody else. Lisa Kaplan, who's here, was our free legal intern for most of the fall, and she was instrumental in helping us get most of these ordinances here. So I really want to recognize her and thank her profusely for her efforts. And she's already been contacted by the governor's office about a possible job.
All right.
So-
You tell them all about us, all right? You tell them everything we need.
So she was, with her direction from Glenn's office, it was just an extraordinary contribution to Lake Work that was worth tens of thousands of dollars.
Thank you very much.
If I could, it's a good segue. We're trying to establish that, or reestablish that internship program, and Lisa was our first point one. She did a great job, and now I've spoken with Clay and Utilities about trying to get an intern. So we've contacted University of Miami, FIU, and Nova Law Schools, and we're working with all 3 schools, hoping to establish a permanent law school intern program for all the departments to be able to go there and assist them with various tasks, save some money too.
Great job, folks. Thank you very much. All right, Commissioner McLean?
2 little things, on the mobile trucks, haven't we had some events over, I wanna say near the library?
Yes.
Yeah. this works with that? I assume we're happy with those events?
One is a short-term thing that's been sanctioned and approved as an event that has a begin date and an end date.
Okay, as long as it's good, I'm good. And the other one was, you went by quickly on signs and political signs and can you review sort of what changed and what didn't?
What changed is that there were nebulous restrictions on what could be approved or reviewed as a political sign in a commercial area. What we determined through Ms. Kaplan's work, and most of our political sign ordinance infringe upon freedom of speech. In residential areas, it really hasn't changed. You can have a little snipe sign, it has a restriction on when it can go up and when it has to come down. Based on the election, there really is no begin date when it can go up, but it has to come down within, I think, 48 hours of the election. In the commercial area, you are limited to how much your property can already have under the code as signage. So if you are already exceeding the sign code limit, about all you can do is a temporary banner, which has a lifespan of about 2 weeks. Otherwise, you can't put up a sign. And that's basically where we came down. So we have some control over how much signage would go up in a commercial area.
And in public areas, was there any change?
What do you-
I thought I saw something slide by about public property or something like that.
Well, it's our relationship to the public right of way when it's a setback. The signage is not allowed to be in the right of way or the setback or publicly owned property. So it will happen, but it's not allowed there.
And did we change anything on that, or it's just the same as it was? Okay.
Thank you. All right, we've got a motion on the floor and a second, public participation. Mr. Tim, followed by Barbara Jean.
Huge Tim, yes, I hope these people sitting in the audience and the people on TV land are not as confused as I am by the questions asked by the commissioners and by the answers given by Mr. Waters. Completely confused me, so if you don't know what's in there, you don't know what they're talking about. I am surprised that if you could bring up the approvals of the, who has to give the approvals. It goes over to CC, I think that means City Commission, and you people don't have a thing to do with it anymore. They can do any darn thing they want without coming before you and making any changes they want, and there's just a list of the people who can give them the approval to do it. This is our city. It doesn't belong to Mr. Waters. It doesn't belong to any of you. It's our city. And we elected you to represent us. Now, if we don't want a 20-story building, there ain't gonna be no 20-story building. Because we told you we don't want a 20-story building. However, maybe that is not in there. I'm not sure, because I don't understand the question. And I didn't understand the answers. But I certainly hope there is not a 20-story building in there. But I ain't too sure. Thank you.
Barbara Jean?
Good evening, Mr. Tim, with the greatest deference and respect, personally, I'm stunned at the command of knowledge that Mr. Waters has without looking at a piece of paper. And I know in my case, if I don't understand something, it's because I didn't read it in its totality. I do, however, need a little bit of clarification from the commission on a mobile food vendor. It's line 175, sir, 171, and I believe that it stated if food is given away. Again, a sensitive statement from me. Does this include food delivery to the homeless that take place in various parks and areas? And I'm wondering, given all of the properties that we may have, can we not, again, I'm begging you, for an ordinance of some sort, some location where food can be delivered and indeed these folks can be properly provided for in a respectful way without being shooed from every corner of the city. let's bring it up on a special workshop or something, but maybe there can be an elaboration on the food vendor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Waters, will you want to address that last one?
Yeah, the way you wrote it up, the mobile food delivery for shut-ins or the disabled or veterans or the aged or homeless, well, I guess for the homeless, is still allowed. We do have some issues, and you're gonna see it a little bit later in a different ordinance, trying to regulate the distribution of food in city parks. We're monitoring that a little bit better, but we're not completely preventing it. This is more geared to uses that are on private property. The LDRs really are germane to property, not rights of way, not the street. The mobile food vending has to happen in a court, or if you have a business that is delivering food, that's under a different whole business tax receipt and different function, because it is mobile in nature. And you're not actually soliciting or selling the merchandise from the street. You were taking it, it's like trying to prevent Domino's from coming to Lake Worth and delivering pizza. This same sort of mechanism.
Okay, thank you. All right, we've got a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.